Costs matter a great deal when investing in precious metals, and it's difficult sometimes to appreciate just how high an impact they can have. In this presentation, I'll illustrate the importance of costs and how they can affect the profit realized from a precious metals investment. What I've put together here is a rough picture of the costs an investor pays when he purchases a precious metals product. The costs can change significantly based upon the choices you make and the effort you make shopping around. It's very important, though, that you understand the heavy toll that paying high costs can have on your success, and some of the things that you can personally do to minimize the burden these costs place on your metals portfolio. One cost you will always pay, regardless of where you shop, is a bid-ask spread. This is the profit that your broker makes in making the market for the physical metal. It is basically the difference between what you pay the broker for your metal and what he will pay you if you want to sell it back. In researching gold products on multiple sites, it appears that the bid-ask spread for gold is fairly small, and it is consistent from product to product. The spread is 3.2% to 3.4% of resale value. Oddly enough, the smallest spread is 3.2% for the American Gold Eagle, indicating that it is the most liquid of all of the gold products. This is counterintuitive because the Gold Eagle generally has the highest premium over spot. However, the buyback price is also significantly higher than spot, and it is the difference between the bid and the ask that interests us as investors. The bid-ask spread is much higher for silver products. On the right-hand side, I show you the spread for small quantities of silver. In this instance, I'm using lots of 20 ounces at a time. This cost will vary considerably by the type of silver purchased, the quantity purchased, the broker used, and also the timing of the purchase. Larger purchases and larger sized coins and bars can reduce the bid-ask spread. In addition, using the website comparesilverprices.com is a good way to find the broker who is currently charging the lowest price for silver bullion products. Be careful though, because sometimes the lowest priced broker will charge more for shipping, but more on that in a minute. Currently, the spread is fairly high for silver products. It won't necessarily be that way forever. For example, the large spread on junk silver coins at 11% above resale is historically high and may come down in the future. Bars, rounds, maples, and eagles are currently at about 14 to 17% of resale. The highest spread goes to semi-numismatic coins such as Australian kookaburras. These coins have a spread of about 28%. Don't get too confused with premium over spot. It is the bid-ask spread that is of interest to us. Silver eagles can have the lower bid-ask spread relative to bars and rounds despite having a higher premium over spot. Resale is the other half of the equation that is often overlooked. One way that silver costs can be minimized is to do what our good friend Rocky does and go to flea markets looking for underpriced coins. The next cost borne by some metal investors is a credit card premium charged if the purchase is made with a credit card. This is a fairly large expense, typically 3 to 4%, and it is completely avoidable. All that is required is either physically going to a coin store and paying with cash or check, or sending a check to your online broker. It is especially important to avoid for gold products because it is as large as the bid-ask spread itself. It is a smaller portion of total cost for silver products, however, it is still a real cost and should be avoided if possible. Yes, there are some cards that provide rewards for using them. Just be careful because the reward may be small relative to the convenience charge the broker will hit you with. The next cost typically paid is a shipping cost. Here I show shipping charges for one particular online broker. The charges will vary from broker to broker, so be sure to shop around. As I mentioned, it is important to get the best total price with shipping included. Buying your metals in larger lots can also reduce your shipping charges. At some point, shipping a larger quantity of coins will increase the shipping costs, but generally shipping a few coins will cost the same to ship as a single coin, so it's worth buying a bunch of them at a time so that if you can afford to do that. On this slide, I'm showing the shipping costs as a percentage of resale for single ounces of gold and for lots of 20 ounces of silver. If you buy less than 20 ounces of silver at a time, the shipping cost will kill you as a percentage of your basis, and you'll also have a difficult time ever making up for this cost. Of course, there are some brokers who give good deals on shipping, and so be sure to compare. If you have a local shop that you can walk or drive to, you can eliminate shipping costs altogether. Yes, the inventory may be smaller, and so it may limit your selections. At the same time, I can almost guarantee that they'll have eagles and maples in stock. As can be seen, shipping for small quantities of metal can add 2 to 4% to the total cost of your precious metal investment, so it is definitely a cost that's worth trying to minimize. The final cost that is typical is sales tax. This is probably the most variable of all of the costs considered here. It will depend upon the state and county you live in, their rules, and the quantity of metal that you buy. I'm showing costs here based upon where I personally live. The rule here is that any purchase over $1,000 is exempt from sales tax. The tax rate is about 9% where I live, so this is a cost that I personally avoid whenever possible by never purchasing less than $1,000 worth at a time. So in this picture, there are no sales tax bars shown for gold because buying a single ounce qualifies for the sales tax exemption. Buying lots of 20 ounces of silver at a time does not meet that hurdle, and so the 9% cost bars are shown on the right. You can see for yourself what a large cost this adds. It's worth avoiding if at all possible. Check the rules in your state. If you live in a high-tax state that provides an exemption limit, try to save up for a large bulk purchase. It will dramatically reduce your tax burden and will likely save you on shipping as an added bonus. So let's make a few general observations. We can see that gold products all have very similar costs. With a little care, the cost of buying and later selling an ounce of gold can be kept as low as 3%. This is a tremendous advantage if what you're looking to do is simply preserve your purchasing power over time. Using a credit card and paying shipping costs will add another 5% to the total cost of investing in gold. But in general, the cost of investing in a gold product will be no more than 3 to 8%, unless you go for a more exotic product. Silver, on the other hand, is a different story. The costs are much higher. Part of this is due to the large spread between the purchase and resale. Premiums have been fairly high for a while. They may come down somewhat in the future, but they probably won't come down dramatically. To provide some historical context, when I first started buying the metals, the spot price of silver was about $5 an ounce, and the bid-ask spread was 50 cents. So while 15% is high, it is not outrageous by historical standards. The best you can do right now, if you avoid shipping, sales tax, and credit card charges, is about 10% for junk silver, about 14 to 17% for non-exotic silver products, and about 17% or more for the semi-numismatic products. This is not necessarily a problem if silver appreciates much more rapidly than gold, but it is an extra burden placed on the silver investor which should be minimized if at all possible. If you don't take care with the other costs, then you could end up paying 25 to 35% over and above the resale value you will receive if you need to sell short term, even more if you buy a semi-numismatic product. Again, many of these costs are only examples of what you might pay. Please research some numbers on your own to examine your own situation in detail. But let's explore the impact of these costs and what they can do to your investment performance. First, we'll take a look at just the impact of the bid-ask spread. Here's a chart of investment performance for metal products purchased without paying sales tax, shipping charges, or credit card convenience fees. On the x-axis, I've plotted a hypothetical increase in resale value on a percentage basis. For example, if the resale of a Gold Eagle coin is currently $1,253, then a 50% increase in resale value means that a coin broker will be willing to pay you $1,880 for it. On the vertical axis, I list the profit you will realize upon the sale of the metal back to the broker. This is exclusive of capital gains tax, which will depend upon your personal situation. You can see from this slide that if you bought a Gold Eagle today and had to sell it back immediately, that your investment return would be a negative 3%, the same as the bid-ask spread. You can also see that you would need for the price of the coin to increase by about 3% just to break even. On the other hand, if you bought a non-exotic silver product and needed to sell it back immediately, you would lose 10 to 15% right off the bat. You will need the product to increase in price by a similar amount just to break even. This illustrates the critical importance of buying silver low and trying to minimize costs. The extreme case is the semi-numismatic, which will lose you more than 20% if you sell it right away, and will have to appreciate by close to 30% for you just to break even. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing the purchase of semi-numismatic items at all. Just recognize that they are less liquid than the other products, and so you'll have to get two things right to be successful here. First, that the bullion will need to move in your favor, and two, that the attention of collectors to this particular issue that you've decided to buy starts to increase. A very important thing to observe, though, is that because of the higher costs associated with buying and then selling silver products relative to gold, the silver investor needs a greater amount of appreciation in order to achieve the same returns as the gold investor. For example, in order to stay even with the gold investor, the silver investor needs at least 10% more appreciation in the underlying bullion value in order to compensate for costs. The differences are even more pronounced when adding in shipping costs, credit card convenience fees, and sales tax. Note that with the assumptions shown in the previous slides, the silver investor in this case will need 30 to 40% more appreciation in the metal than the gold investor just to compensate for costs. This is not to say that such outperformance is impossible. I personally believe that it is. The important thing to note, though, is that if costs aren't managed, they can really eat into a large fraction of that outperformance. Managing costs is critical. So let's narrow this down and take a look just at the Gold Eagle and Silver Eagle with and without extra costs. The reason I limit this slide to the Eagle products is that their costs are fairly representative of the group of gold and silver bullion investment products available. You can see here just how large a burden extra costs can place on the metals investments. An investor who is not careful with a gold purchase can pay 5% more than he or she otherwise would have to. An investor who is not careful with a silver purchase can pay an extra 17% or more. So it is immediately clear that the silver investor has to take much more care in trying to minimize the extra costs that can drag down his performance. The most punishing of these costs are sales tax and shipping costs on small orders, followed by credit card fees. Fortunately, with a little care, these costs can be minimized or eliminated altogether. So why is this all so important? Well, let's give a real example. Suppose investor A walks into his local coin shop and buys a single gold eagle for cash. Investor B places an online order with his broker for a roll of 20 silver eagles and pays with a credit card. The gold to silver ratio is currently at 65, and the silver investor buys the silver because he thinks that there is a really good chance that the ratio will get back to 50 sometime in the near future. Sure enough, it turns out that his suspicions are right. The price of gold increases about 3% over the course of the next month, but the price of silver takes off, bringing the ratio back down to 50. Excitedly, the silver investor calls his online broker to sell back his roll of 20 silver eagles. The metal price went up 34% compared to gold's modest 3% move. So how much profit did the silver investor actually realize? Well, the answer is 1%, which is only modestly above what the gold investor would have realized for a nearly zero move. Now, if the silver investor had minimized his expenses, he could have realized a 16% return, which is a good return, but much smaller than the 34% increase he otherwise would have seen in the spot price. So I would encourage you all to investigate the costs that you are paying for your bullion products and do your best to try to minimize them. Costs do matter.